Hello and welcome, wherever you are right now, whether tucked into your bed, curled on a couch, or simply taking a quiet moment for yourself. Allow me to invite you into a slower rhythm. Tonight, we'll wander back through time together, far from the insistent noise of modern life, into the winding corridors and great halls of medieval castles. We will explore lives once lived behind high stone walls. Listen to stories of knights whose ambitions rose higher than wisdom, allowed drift through shadowed chambers that still seem to echo with whispers of restless spirits, and then join lavish feasts where golden goblets clinked above simmering tensions. This will be a gentle journey, one that lingers on small details and quiet reflections. You needn't pay rapt attention. If your thoughts begin to drift or your eyelids grow heavy, that's perfectly all right. These stories will continue on their steady course, like a soft river of time flowing by. Content, whether you float along wide awake or slip gradually into sleep. So take a long, slow breath. Allow your shoulders to ease, and imagine for a little while that you stand in the courtyard of a medieval castle. Stone towers rising all around you, banners stirring lazily in the evening breeze. Ready to begin this calm exploration of another age. First impressions. The living stone. Imagine yourself standing just inside the heavy gates of a medieval castle. Perhaps you step through a thick wooden door banded in dark iron, the hinges creaking under their own age. You pause there on a threshold of worn flagstones, feeling the temperature drop. A quiet breath of cold air that seems to exhale straight from the walls. Take a moment just to breathe. Notice how the air tastes here, faintly of damp stone, mingled with a lingering wisp of old hearth smoke, and somewhere underneath, the sharper tang of tanned leather or the musk of horses from the nearby stable yard. Each breath seems to pull you further into this place, slower and calmer than the world you left behind. The castle walls tower around you. If you reach out and lay a hand on the nearest block, it is rough under your fingers, with tiny edges chipped by time. Small beads of moisture gather there, cool and persistent. Some stones cradled thin threads of moss, the delicate green stubborn against the grey. You might run your fingertips over these tiny living lines, feeling how tender they are, how quietly determined, the constant, patient cold. Move now down a dim passage, your footsteps echoing softly. Even in the height of summer, the deeper you walk into the castle's belly, the cooler the air grows. The thick walls swallow the sun's warmth before it ever reaches these inner spaces. It is a patient, gentle cold, not a biting winter frost, but the calm insistence of stone that has known centuries of shadow. Imagine your breath here, rising in small clouds on certain mornings. Servants pass by in layered garments, long linen, under tunics, thick woolen kirtles, rough cloaks thrown over shoulders. They nod to you out of habit, hands busy with baskets or books. The wool scratches at their skin, but is a friend against the chill. In the deepest chambers, the cold seems almost alive. You might notice droplets forming along wooden beams where they meet the walls, tiny mirrored globes that tremble before they finally slip down and vanish. These drips are a quiet metronome, counting out the hours in a place that feels almost outside of time. The floor underfoot, rushes and life hidden within. Look down to see the floor beneath your boots or soft leather shoes. It is rarely left bare. In most halls and chambers, bundles of rushes or straw are spread out, a simple carpet meant to soften hard steps, soak up spilled wine, and catch crumbs from the table. At first glance it seems pleasant, even charming, but soon you notice darker patches where liquids have seeped in, where old spills went unnoticed. Tiny bits of yesterday's bread hide among the stalks, perhaps a fallen berry leaves a little purple stain, and all this makes a perfect refuge for small creatures. Fleas thrive here. Little beetles scuttle away from your footsteps. At night, when the castle grows quiet, you might even hear the faintest rustling as mice explore the woven mat of stalks, seeking leftover crumbs. It's common to scratch your ankle or cough, an absent-minded gesture. No one comments on it. Flea bites are simply part of living here, as much a feature of castle life as stone arches or iron sconces. People might mention keeping good company, meaning the ever-present pests that share their world. The matter of chamber pots, shift your eyes to the corners of rooms or behind thick curtains. You will almost always find a chamber pot there. Simple, clay or metal vessels used when one prefers not to brave the colder corridors at night. More refined castles might have garderobes, small closets built into the walls, perched over vertical shafts that plunge down 2 pits below, or perhaps empty discreetly into the moat. But the truth is, most residents, even many nobles, keep these modest pots nearby. Each morning, servants carry them carefully down narrow stairs, doing their best to avoid splashing. The smell lingers in the air, faint but unmistakable, a reminder that grandeur does not quite banish the simpler needs of the body. Even richly dressed, lords and ladies wrinkle their noses sometimes. They breathe through sleeves perfumed with lavender or rose petals. They commission sweet-smelling sachets to hang from belts or tuck into bodices. Yet all know that the real scent of castle life is an undercurrent of human closeness. Sweat, earth, food, and waste intertwine. Fires that barely reach look across the room to the hearth. A fire burns there, the flames low, shifting lazily over logs that crackle and occasionally send up a tiny spray of sparks. Servants keep it fed, stacking new wood with practiced hands. But even this heat is limited. Step away just a few paces, and the warmth fades quickly. In winter, those seated nearest the hearth roast their shins while their backs feel the creeping cold, like twin worlds coexisting on either side of their body. Children and dogs cluster close, drawn by instinct. A small greyhound might rest its narrow head on someone's knee, sighing with contentment. You see steam rise off damp cloaks as they begin to dry, a slow ghost lifting from the wall, yet the far corners of the hall remain cool, sometimes almost frigid. Here, the tapestry-covered walls do their best to trap a little warmth, their heavy woven surfaces telling stories of hunts or mythical beasts. If you lean close, you can smell the wool and sometimes even the faint oils used to keep moths away. The duties of daily life, courtesy and small anxieties. Now imagine you are not a visiting stranger, but someone who lives here. Perhaps you are the sister of the Lord Steward, or a minor noble's son taken in to learn manners and service. Your life is a gentle maze of obligations. You rise early to attend small prayers in the chapel, where candles gutter softly and incense drifts in slow, curling plumes. Breakfast is simple. Bread, maybe a bit of cheese, if you are fortunate. But meals are also performances. You sit with back straight, voice mild, choosing words carefully. Every nod, every polite inquiry is a tiny stone placed in the long road of alliances. A careless laugh, a glance held too long, can ripple outward into small whispers you might never hear. In the afternoons, perhaps you walk through the bailey, nodding to men-at-arms, sharpening swords, or tending to gear. Chickens cluck around your feet, scratching for stray seeds. Somewhere nearby, a mason chips at a new stone lintel, the steady tap-tap echoing under the open sky. The quiet spectacle of twilight as evening draws near. Candles and rushlights are lit one by one, each tiny flame pushing back the heavy dusk. Shadows dance along the walls. A juggler or a storyteller might be brought into the hall, offering a gentle distraction before the long dark truly settles in. Servants move among benches and tables, refilling cups with watered wine or small ale. Laughter lifts and drifts, then dies down again, like a slow tide. If you pause to listen, you can hear the soft clink of knives against trenchers, the low hum of conversation, the sigh of a dog settling closer to the fire. Outside the windows, narrow slits in thick stone. Night has fully arrived. An owl calls once. Distant guards on the ramparts answer each other with murmured words, keeping watch not just for enemies but for any small sign that the world beyond these walls might be shifting in some silent way. Nights that are rarely silent when at last you retire to your chamber. It is to a bed piled with heavy blankets. Still, cold air finds its way in, slipping under doors, creeping over bare skin. You tuck your feet more tightly beneath the covers, listening to the small creaks of timber settling. Sometimes you hear mice rustling among stored sacks of grain. Sometimes a draft stirs the curtains, making them whisper against the walls. These sounds are not unsettling, but rather a quiet chorus of the castle itself, its living breath through the long hours until dawn, the gentle truth of castle life. So this is what it was really like to live in a medieval castle. a life layered with courtesies and small fears, with modest meals eaten under watchful eyes, with fleas hiding in rushes and chill that seemed almost a second skin. It was not the life of fairy tales, not shining courts or endless feasts, but a daily negotiation with discomfort and fragile pride. And yet, for many, these walls meant safety. They meant a refuge against bandits or rival lords, against storms that battered smaller homes to pieces. People endured the drafts, the chamber pots, the cold stone floors, because they understood what lay beyond the gatehouse: uncertainty, harder hunger, dangers that wore many faces. So each day they rose, pulled the wool closer around shoulders, and stepped once more into the long rhythm of castle life. The same rhythm that now, centuries later, drifts to you like an echo, soft and unhurried, across the distance of time. A boy shaped by expectation. Imagine yourself standing in a candlelit chamber in the vast royal palace of Poitiers, or perhaps within the older, echoing walls of Here, young Richard, not yet a king, moves among courtiers who bow and smile carefully. He is perhaps 14 or 15, with bright eyes and the early strength of long days spent riding and training at arms. From his earliest memory, Richard's world was carved by duty. The very air he breathed carried whispers of his father, King Henry II, a man whose ambitions stretched across England and deep into France, and always there was the shadow of his elder brother Henry the young king, crowned while still a boy to secure succession. Richard learned quickly that affection in royal families was a delicate matter, often tangled with suspicion. Imagine him watching his father receive petitions from distant barons, the older man's broad shoulders draped in heavy cloaks, his beard threaded with grey. Young Richard stands off to the side, fingers curling around the edge of a carved chair, absorbing every quiet lesson. How power is wielded, how trust is measured out like coins, carefully, reluctantly. The forging of a warrior. Prince Richard grew into a prince renowned not just for noble blood but for personal valor. By 17, he commanded armies of his own, riding at the head of lines of knights whose polished helms caught the sunlight like small stars. Picture him astride a war horse, armored in chain mail that ripples and clinks with each subtle shift. Underneath the steel, linen, and padded gambesons guard his skin. A surcoat bearing his colors flutters over his knees. His sword hangs heavy at his side, a constant companion, its grip worn smooth beneath his glove. He loved battle, or at least the dance of it, the thunder of hooves over fields, the barked commands, the sudden intimate clash of metal on metal. Chroniclers would later write of Richard's fearless charges, of how he would press forward even when wiser heads counseled caution. In song, he became almost a figure of myth, the very image of chivalry, bright and fierce. Yet beneath this shimmer was a man who knew that loyalty among nobles could be as fragile as spun glass. Alliances turned with the wind. Even his brothers rebelled against their father more than once, and Richard himself took up arms against Henry II during bitter disputes over inheritance. Such was the web of medieval power. Sons rose against fathers, brothers watched brothers with wary eyes, the crusade that burned bright. When at last Richard took the throne of England in 1189, he did so with the air of destiny fulfilled. Tall, strong, crowned under the vaulted arches of Westminster, he set his mind almost immediately on the Holy Land. Imagine the solemn pageantry of his departure. Banners lifting in the sea wind at the port of Marseille, soldiers crowding the docks, priests chanting blessings that drifted across salt air. Richard boarded his ships not simply as a king but as a crusader, vowing to reclaim Jerusalem after its capture by Saladin. For years, the crusade dominated his reign. Across the sun-bleached stones of Acre, and along the fierce lines drawn outside Richard fought with a brilliance that astonished even seasoned warriors. He negotiated with Saladin in letters that still echo with wary respect. He stormed walls, rallied men on desperate mornings, carved out victories that turned back the tide of Saracen advance. At least for a while, yet even in triumph, he found no lasting peace. His treasury strained under the weight of the campaigns. News from home brought warnings of plots. His brother John weaving intrigues. The French King Philip Augustus probing England's weaknesses. The Holy Land glittered with promise, but Richard knew he could not hold it forever. The slow, fateful return. And so Richard made his long journey home. Imagine the small flotilla of ships braving sudden squalls and rocky coasts. Picture Richard wrapped in a heavy cloak against the chill, standing on a deck as sea spray dampens his beard. His thoughts might be of England's green hills, or the stone keeps waiting to test his rule. But fate, ever capricious, had prepared its own ambush. Traveling overland through Europe, Richard fell into the hands of Duke Leopold of Austria, who bore old grudges from crusade insults. The English king was taken prisoner, held for a ruinous ransom. Across his kingdom, people groaned under heavy taxes to pay for their monarch's freedom. The memory of these levies would linger long after coins changed hands. When Richard at last stood free again, he was older, perhaps wearier, though still girded in the iron habits of command. He returned to war almost immediately, first to stamp out rebellions sparked in his absence, then to challenge French encroachments on his continental lands. A careless moment, a quiet tragedy picture, now a spring afternoon in 1199, outside the modest castle of Châlus-Jabrol in central France. Richard, despite all he had survived, crusades, captivity, countless battles, chooses to oversee a minor siege in person. It was, by many measures, an insignificant affair aimed at bringing a troublesome vassal to heel. From a nearby parapet, a crossbow bolt flies. It does not strike deep. The point lodges in Richard's shoulder near the neck, a wound so slight that by evening he laughs it off, joking with his attendants, praising the skill of the boy who shot him. But days pass. The wound grows hot. Infection, the quiet, patient killer of so many in these centuries, slips in with silent certainty. The great king, the Lionheart who had charged through Saracen lines, who had faced down rival monarchs and betrayal within his own family, lies on a narrow bed, breath growing shallow. Imagine the dim chamber. Rushlight flames trembling in small clay holders, shadows crawling up rough walls. Richard's voice is low, the words half caught in a thick air. Some say he summoned the very youth who shot him, forgave him, even gifted him money. Those stories conflict. Still, it is easy to picture the king's hand lifting in a quiet absolution, the ripple through kingdoms when at last Richard dies. The news fans outward like rings on water. In England, bells toll in abbeys and market squares alike. Barons tighten their hands on sword hilts, wondering what shifts will come. His mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, formidable even in her later years, receives the tidings with a composure hard-won by decades of courtly storms. Yet it is not simply politics that feels this loss. Soldiers who once marched under his banners remember campfires lit outside Acre, the proud lift of his head before a charge. Troubadours weave melancholy verses of the king who so loved battle, who met death not on a grand field but by the slip of a minor arrow. A gentle truth beneath the legend so passes Richard the Lionheart, not by grand conquest or glorious duel, but through the quiet work of a single crossbow wound left to fester. It is a reminder, perhaps, that even the greatest figures in our histories, those whose deeds unfurl in vibrant banners across chronicles, were flesh no different from yours. And so, as you rest now, listening to the slow hush of your own breath, you might reflect on how these grand castles and fierce campaigns always return. In the end, 2 quiet rooms, 2 fevered whispers, to the steady approach of night. The ghostly legends of English castles, stepping into stories that never quite leave. Imagine now that you are walking slowly through the winding passages of a centuries-old English castle. Your soft leather shoes make little sound on the uneven stones. High above, narrow windows let in thin shafts of greyish light. It's a quiet hour, perhaps late afternoon tipping into dusk. Somewhere far off, a door closes with a hollow thump. Here, time seems to gather in these draughty corridors and vaulted halls. The air carries more than just the smell of damp stone and aging wood. It holds memories, or so it is easy to believe. For as long as people have built castles, they have also whispered of spirits who never quite moved on. These are not stories meant to startle you awake, but rather to draw you slowly into another kind of stillness, the hushed breath of old walls that remember too well. The Headless Queen. Anne Boleyn's restless walk. Consider first the figure of Anne. She once walked proudly across polished floors, silk gowns whispering around her ankles, dark eyes quick with intelligence, the second wife of Henry VIII, mother to the future Elizabeth I. And finally, a woman condemned. After her execution at the Tower of London, legends say Anne could not quite rest. Even today, some claim to glimpse her figure drifting through the Tower grounds on quiet nights, her hands lightly cradling the head that was taken from her. Imagine this gentle, mournful procession. A slender woman in rich Tudor sleeves, her long hair still arranged in careful coils, eyes closed as if in troubled sleep, not rushing or menacing, simply moving forward, step by measured step, as though endlessly retracing the last slow moments of her life. At other times, they say she wanders near Hever Castle, her childhood home. Perhaps the memory of happier days pulls her there, to stroll beneath ancient oaks and along the still waters of the moat. People speak of a delicate perfume, lavender, maybe lingering where no living woman stands. The silent monks of many cloisters. Not all spirits are royalty. Many English castles grew up beside monasteries or incorporated small chapels tended by monks. Over time, these brothers departed, sometimes through dissolution under Henry VIII, sometimes simply as the centuries rolled on. Yet legends tell that some remain. Picture a corridor lit by a single torch bracketed to the wall. The flame sputters, casting slow-turning shadows that stretch and contract. Down this corridor, a dark shape glides, the outline of a hooded figure in a long robe, hands tucked serenely into wide sleeves. Witnesses describe no face, no sound of sandals scuffing the stone, just a sense of coolness, as if the air has drawn itself close in a hush. Perhaps these are memories of monks rising for nocturnal prayers, moving gently through cloisters by starlight, voices once lifted in plainsong, that now exists only as a quiet pulse in the walls. The Screaming Lady of Berry Pomeroy. Turn your mind now to Berry Pomeroy Castle in Devon, often called one of England's most haunted ruins. Unlike the polished fortresses of royal courts, Berry Pomeroy stands, partly collapsed, its outer walls clutching at empty sky, ivy trailing through shattered windows. Locals tell of the White Lady, thought by some to be the spirit of Margaret Pomeroy, imprisoned long ago in the dungeons by her own jealous sister. They say she wastes through the rooms in a gown pale as mist, her face drawn with a sorrow deeper than words. On certain nights, a scream rings out, not sharp, but long and trembling, fading into the darkness like a breath finally let go. Imagine hearing such a sound as you stand alone in the moonlit courtyard. Would it make your heart race, or simply remind you how very long human grief can linger, weaving itself quietly into stone, gentle patterns? Why we tell these tales? Why do these stories cling so stubbornly to old castles? Perhaps it is simply that such places were already shaped by drama, by marriages meant to bind kingdoms, by betrayals inked on fragile parchments, by the clatter of armored men setting out for war. The walls themselves were built to hold back danger, to channel human lives into neat defenses. It makes a kind of sense that echoes of strong feeling, love, jealousy, regret, might lodge here more than anywhere else. You might wonder if some of these sightings are nothing more than lantern light catching a swirl of fog, or the way tired minds conjure patterns in half-seen shapes, a fold in a tapestry, a creak in an old bead. And yet, there is a gentle comfort in imagining that lives once keenly felt do not simply vanish, that some part of their yearning walks on, softly, alongside ours, wandering with the unseen picture yourself, wandering through one of these castles after all other visitors have gone. You pass under heavy arches, run a hand along the cool curve of an ancient stair. Your own footsteps sound strangely loud. Then, maybe, you pause by a narrow window, gazing out over a courtyard grown dim with evening. A breeze moves through, carrying with it a slight rustle, no more than a sigh. Is it only the wind? Of course, and yet the stories slip around you like a light shawl, settling on your shoulders. In that moment, the distance between you and those who lived, loved, and sometimes suffered here feels very small. Nightfall and quiet acceptance as night draws fully over these old stones. The tales of headless queens, silent monks, and wailing ladies fade back into the gentle dark. The walls breathe out the day's last warmth. Candles sputter to their ends, leaving the hush complete. Perhaps that is all hauntings really are. Tender reminders that time moves in wide loops, that longing and memory sometimes refuse to be neatly laid to rest. They become part of the place, part of the way moonlight pools in a corner, or how your own breath sounds in a corridor suddenly still. So if your eyes begin to close now, It's all right. Let these old ghosts keep their slow watch while you drift off. They have walked these halls far longer than we have, and they will remain quiet and patient long after we move on. Feasting with the nobility, a slow entry into grandeur. Picture yourself entering a great hall just before the evening's feast begins. Your shoes meet cool flagstones worn slightly concave by centuries of footsteps. Above you rises a soaring ceiling of timber beams, dark with smoke from countless fires, their weight balanced on carved corbels that watch you with calm, wooden faces. Long tables stretch down the hall, each laid with heavy linen cloths. Brass candlesticks catch the first flickers of flame, small halos blooming around each wick. The scent of beeswax mixes with subtler threads, roasted meat, warm bread, crushed rosemary. Beneath it all, that ever-present undercurrent of old stone and damp rushes. Stewards move with practiced quiet, adjusting benches, smoothing table covers. Their hands brush crumbs from surfaces already nearly spotless. For perfection, here is a kind of ritual. In this world, appearance is not idle vanity. It is a delicate language of loyalty and power. The grand arrival of the course is soon. The first dishes appear. Trenchers, thick slices of bread that double as plates, are set out before each place. Then platters arrive, borne on broad shoulders by kitchen boys flushed from the heat of hop. There might be roasted capons, their skins dark gold and crackling, small pies filled with minced pork and herbs, bowls of stewed beans laced with parsley. Each dish sends up soft spirals of steam, carrying rich, savory promises. Watch as a servant places a dish of salted fish before a pair of visiting lords. They nod gravely, offering small words of thanks, though their eyes weigh more than just the meal. To share bread here is to declare, for this evening at least, a mutual trust, however fragile. And then, like a slow flourish, the centerpiece arrives. Perhaps a whole peacock, its iridescent feathers carefully saved and arranged back around the cooked body, the head restored with glassy eyes and a thin gold circlet. It is a triumph, more for the eyes than for the tongue, a spectacle that murmurs of wealth, of reach, of the ability to command both nature and kitchen. The subtle performance of entertainment. Meanwhile, a pair of musicians drift through the hall. One plucks at a small harp, drawing delicate ripples of sound that seem almost to float above the food. Another plays a slender flute, weaving gentle notes that curl into the higher beams. Their music is not meant to dominate the room, but to thread through conversation, filling small silences with something tender and easy. Elsewhere, a jester in bright motley leans forward to whisper a sly joke to a lady who covers her mouth to hide a quick smile. His bell caps jingle faintly as he withdraws, eyes darting for another listener. Even these small antics serve a deeper purpose: to keep tensions from growing too tight, to nudge laughter where suspicion might otherwise find a foothold. The undercurrent of careful conversation now. Listen to the conversations at the tables. Voices are pitched low, controlled compliments about the saltiness of the broth or the freshness of the bread shade easily into subtle probes. How fares your distant cousin's marriage? Is it true your brother rides north soon with 50 men? Each question glides under a smooth surface, seeking small truths. A lord lifts his cup decorated with enamel figures of hunting hounds, and lets a servant pour spiced wine. He swirls it once, watching the liquid catch, torchlight in slow red arcs. Then he takes a careful sip, his expression composed. Perhaps inside he weighs a letter received only that morning, sealed with the mark of a rival family. Such tensions rarely show on faces here, trained from youth to the art of reserve. And as you watch, it becomes clear that this feast, with all its music and rich platters, is more than mere sustenance. It is a theater of alliances. Each laugh or gentle nod, another line in a script carefully maintained. Small gestures, deep meaning. Notice to the gestures between diners. A delicate hand extends a dish toward a neighbor, a lady offering sugared almonds to a visiting knight. He accepts with a slight bow of his head, murmuring a soft phrase that might be gratitude, or perhaps something more cautious. Across the hall, a steward refilled cups, his movements efficient and silent. Servants circulate with damp cloths to wipe fingers after oily morsels. Even these small ministrations are woven into the evening's tapestry of status, who is served first, who receives the choicest cuts, whose trencher is replaced promptly when soaked through. Underneath the easy politeness lies the knowledge that standing here is never entirely secure. Fortunes change, favors falter. A smile today could vanish by next season's harvest, replaced by distant eyes across a table exactly like this one. The slow winding down. As the evening drifts on, the hall grows warmer, fuller with the layered sense of feasting. Laughter becomes softer, voices slow. The harpist's tune grows simpler, repeating small phrases as if even the music grows drowsy. Servants bring out final small dishes, candied nuts, perhaps a tiny tart flavored with honey and clove. These are not grand displays, but tender little closures to the night's ceremony, a final sweetness that gently signals the end. One by one, guests stand, nod farewells, and are guided by torchlight to their chambers or to mounts waiting in the courtyard. The great hall breathes a collective sigh. Benches scrape back. Candles are pinched out, sending up thin wavers of smoke that merge with the darker air above. The hush after, and the soft truth when all is finally still. The room settles into its own quiet. Trenchers scraped bare lie stacked for the servants to carry away. Small crumbs dot the tablecloths like pale seeds. The fire burns low, logs collapsing into each other with gentle sighs. Imagine walking slowly through this space now, your fingers trailing along the edge of the table where gold plates gleamed only hours ago. The echo of music seems to linger, a faint vibration in the timber beams overhead. Perhaps you pause by an empty seat, remembering the proud tilt of a head, the low, careful tone of a vow, half spoken over salted meat. In the end, these grand feasts, with all their color and careful dances of courtesy, were as fragile as candle flames, blown out in a breath, leaving only a memory of warmth, a calm reflection to close this chapter. So this was feasting with the nobility, not merely indulgence, but an elaborate weaving of trust and wary respect, performed night after night under watchful chant. Beneath every laughter and raised goblet lay careful calculation. Who supped, who poured for whom, whose plate was heaped highest. Yet it was also human. Gentle smiles exchanged across platters of peacock, fingers lingering for a moment over shared dishes. Small sighs of satisfaction as sweet wine lingered on the tongue. Even in these grand performances, the simple hope for comfort and belonging shone quietly through. So rest here a moment longer, letting this world of warm torchlight, rich meats, and soft harp strings drift around you. Let it blur at the edges, like the way candlelight dances on old stone walls. And if your eyelids grow heavy, that too is fitting. For beyond the hall's doors, the castle sleeps under the same moon you do, its secrets and small intrigues folded gently into the night, drawing it all together. So now we come softly to the end of this long evening. Journey through the stone corridors and hidden chambers of the medieval world. Together, we have wandered beneath towering arches and along narrow, draughty halls. We have felt the chill of damp stone under our fingertips, brushed aside rushes where tiny lives stirred unseen, and watched as gentle plumes of breath curled into the cold air. We've moved quietly through the routines of castle life, waking at early bells, bowing low in dimly lit halls, sharing modest bread on days when bounty held back. We stood close to Richard the Lionheart as he rode beneath snapping banners on sunlit fields, and later as he lay on a narrow bed, a minor wound slowly dimming the light in his fierce eyes. We drifted alongside silent monks and sorrowful queens, ghosts whose tender griefs wove themselves into walls that seemed almost to sigh with memory, and we sat with wary nobles, savoring honeyed almonds and small jests, all the while watching each other with careful smiles. The castle grows quiet again now. If you listen carefully, you might almost hear how it all fades into a hush. The clatter of trenchers, the bright strains of a harp, the low murmur of pledges made under shadowed tapestries, all slowly slip away, like water seeping into old stone. Candles burn low along the long tables. The last flames lean and waver, sending up faint threads of smoke that curl and vanish. Beyond high windows, moonlight drifts down over towers and parapets, softening even the harsh angles of battlements. Somewhere a guard shifts on his post, stamping feet against the cold. But his distant movements seem gentle too, part of a rhythm that has gone on for countless nights, a gentle thought before sleep. So rest here for a moment more. Consider how the people who lived these stories, the lords in their broad embroidered sleeves, the kitchen boys hauling baskets of bread, the ladies smoothing folds of silk, the jest chasing small laughter from guarded hearts, were each wrapped in concerns not so unlike your own. They worried over duties, wondered about the strength of a friend's promise, hoped for small pleasures at the end of long days. They scratched at flea bites, sighed at cold draughts, smiled across tables hoping the smile would be returned. Even their grandest fears, of rival armies, of whispered betrayals, of ghosts stirring in dark corridors, were rooted in a very simple wish to keep their small world safe, to keep those they loved close, to find a little rest without dread. Let it slip into dream. So allow all this, the towers, the banners, the restless spirits and cautious banquets, to soften now. Let it become a gentle blur, like mist settling over distant hills. With each slow breath, feel yourself drifting further from these echoing chambers, stepping quietly back into the safe dim of your own room, your own bed. Here there are no cold draughts, no watchful courtiers, no duties pressing at dawn. Breathe again, and let sleep come, if it wishes, like a careful hand drawing a warm cloak around your shoulders. For all the grand struggles of the past, here in this quiet moment, you are safe. You have wandered long enough for tonight. Let the castles keep their patient watch. You need only rest. Drawing it all together. So now we come softly to the end of this long evening. Journey through the stone corridors and hidden chambers of the medieval world. Together, we have wandered beneath towering arches and along narrow, drafty halls. We have felt the chill of damp stone under our fingertips, brushed aside rushes where tiny lives stirred unseen, and watched as gentle plumes of breath curled into the cold air. We've moved quietly through the routines of castle life, waking at early bells, bowing low in dimly lit halls, sharing modest bread on days when bounty held back. We stood close to Richard the Lionheart as he rode beneath snapping banners on sunlit fields, and later as he lay on a narrow bed, a minor wound slowly dimming the light in his fierce eyes. We drifted alongside silent monks and sorrowful queens, ghosts whose tender griefs wove themselves into walls that seemed almost to sigh with memory, and we sat with wary nobles, savoring honeyed almonds and small jests, all the while watching each other with careful smiles. The castle grows quiet again now. If you listen carefully, you might almost hear how it all fades into a hush. The clatter of trenchers, the bright strains of a harp, the low murmur of pledges made under shadowed tapestries, all slowly slip away, like water seeping into old stone. Candles burn low along the long tables. The last flames lean and waver, sending up faint threads of smoke that curl and vanish. Beyond high windows, moonlight drifts down over towers and parapets, softening even the harsh angles of battlements. Somewhere a guard shifts on his post, stamping feet against the cold. But his distant movements seem gentle too, part of a rhythm that has gone on for countless nights, a gentle thought before sleep. So rest here for a moment more. Consider how the people who lived these stories, the lords in their broad embroidered sleeves, the kitchen boys hauling baskets of bread, the ladies smoothing folds of silk, the jest chasing small laughter from guarded hearts, were each wrapped in concerns not so unlike your own. They worried over duties, wondered about the strength of a friend's promise, hoped for small pleasures at the end of long days. They scratched at flea bites, sighed at cold draughts, smiled across tables hoping the smile would be returned. Even their grandest fears, of rival armies, of whispered betrayals, of ghosts stirring in dark corridors, were rooted in a very simple wish to keep their small world safe, to keep those they loved close, to find a little rest without dread. Let it slip into dream. So allow all this, the towers, the banners, the restless spirits and cautious banquets, to soften now. Let it become a gentle blur, like mist settling over distant hills. With each slow breath, feel yourself drifting further from these echoing chambers, stepping quietly back into the safe dim of your own room, your own bed. Here there are no cold draughts, no watchful courtiers, no duties pressing at dawn. Breathe again, and let sleep come, if it wishes, like a careful hand drawing a warm cloak around your shoulders. For all the grand struggles of the past, here in this quiet moment, you are safe. You have wandered long enough for tonight. Let the castles keep their patient watch. You need only rest.